He's James Collins.
He is Alec Cranston, and this is the Matter of Facts podcast. The Matter of Facts podcast brings you the unsung heroes, the unsung stories, news and happenings from across our wonderful city that you maybe thought happened but didn't quite know the truth behind.
And get you all in the loop on what's going on, what's to come, and what can we be prepared for. Welcome to Matter of Facts, Season 2, Episode 4. I'm here with my esteemed co-host, Mr. James Collins.
Oh, and here's the ever sexy Mr. Alec Cranston.
It's so nice to hear from you. I appreciate that.
I like to tell you that at least once a day, as you know, by text message or phone call.
Or voice note.
Just like, Alec, remember, you're sexy.
It gets me through the day.
Good, I'm pleased.
It gets me through the day.
No one sends me that. I just get hate mail.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry about that. I gotta get.
Males hate me.
I gotta put you in your place. That's good. There's a lot of different ways you can go there.
There is.
So we're here, Episode 4. James, I feel like it's been a little while, not too long, but we're busy, living busy lives. Work is busy.
Busy time of year, isn't
Very
it?
busy time of year. What do we call it? The 90-day sprint.
This is the 90-day full sprint where all hell breaks loose in the world of commercial real estate between September and December, and then you mentally and physically burn out. Or if you do what I did last year, which is 100% true, the day you finish work for Christmas, you are carrying the top of a desk down the side of your house, you slip on some moss, it goes flying, you bang yourself up, and you start literally crying.
That's a tough one.
My neighbor came out and she said, James, and I was lying between our homes bawling because I was mentally and physically broken.
Yep.
And this was the straw that broke the camel's back, or the desk that broke the broker's back.
Hey.
The desk that broke the broker's neck.
I like that. Oh.
And then she had to go and get my wife. My wife came out and picked me up like a 10-year-old and took me in the house. So we're trying to avoid that this year.
Sometimes you need those days, though. There's nothing wrong with that when you hit your breaking
apparently
point.
somebody said there's something called work-life balance. I've never heard of it.
I don't know. No one. Work-life balance, come on. Who has that? Who's got that? If you figured out work-life balance, please let us know, and we'll be happy to hear your ideas, because we need it.
We do need it, and we also need a guest. So who are we chatting with today?
Today we have Mr. Matthew Gorman from Cox & Palmer, who is an entertainment lawyer and also owns his own agency, Oceantown Music, which I'm very much looking forward to hearing about. He does both, and he has a really interesting story on how that kind of came to be and how he's kind of weaved the two together and, kind of what the future is going to hold. So we're looking forward to having him on.
That sounds like a worthy conversation, doesn't it?
I think so. I think it'd be very interesting. Something we haven't talked about yet on this podcast, which is quite cool.
And Halifax is still mattering. That's why it's the Matter of Facts podcast.
It is mattering.
It's still insane. Do you want to chat about something as insane as the crane?
Quite insane.
Insane as the crane. Insane as the crane. Insane as the crane. Kinda insane like the crane.
This episode, Insane as the Crane, it's taking a dark, insane turn. The cost of living. It is a scary subject, and it's an important subject too. And what I'd like us to try to do, Alec, is to talk about it in a sensible way. Because if you look at Reddit and you talk, everyone just says, "Well, the city's got so expensive," and it's so true. But I want to pick that apart and try to have a structured discussion about the cost of living. And this is off the back. What precipitated this, aside from the fact it now costs you guys about $5,000 for coffee, is the report that came out, or a post that came out from Nova Scotia Justice for Workers. This is a rightfully admirable advocacy group that's fighting for fair conditions and policies for all of us here in the province that work. They posted something online which said the cost of living in Halifax is now more than the cost of living in Vancouver. The metrics they gave, and then we'll have a discussion.
Yeah.
Halifax living wage, and I'm going to say one other thing. What is living wage? A lot of people, they confuse living wage and minimum wage. So, of course, minimum wage is whatever jurisdiction you're in setting a minimum hourly rate that people must get paid. The difference with the living wage is that the living wage reflects what people need to earn to cover the actual cost of living in their community. So it is what you need to have to live and cover your basic needs versus what the government mandates. So living wage in Halifax, despite being $15 an hour minimum wage, living wage is $26.50 an hour. So
for Halifax,
that's pretty crazy.
$26.50. I was going to guess $27.28. I feel like I've seen it online,
Yeah.
but $26.50. Wow.
And Vancouver's lower. This is the point, right? Vancouver's now $25.68 an
Living
hour.
wage.
Living wage. Minimum wage is higher than here at $16.75. So, you know, there's many data points, but Halifax is essentially more expensive than Vancouver. Before we dig in, and I'll tell you how we're going to do this. I'm going to be the fact man. You're going to be the opinion man.
I like it.
What do you make of it?
It's, I mean, of course it's sad to hear, and we see it all around us. You talk to people every day in our line of work, our friends and our family, and hearing how everybody's affected by it. You know, I can tell from experience. I can know from experience in the past 5 years. You know, my fiance and I have jumped around apartments, so we've seen that side of it, from the just getting out of university to having our first like real jobs to also trying to live and have an apartment, have a car, and really like when we peel back the cost of that, it's crazy. We talk about it every day. We're like, did we really spend that much on that? We look at our apartment and and that's a big reason why we bought a house. Not saying houses are the best investment in any given time, considering how much they may be going for and the interest rates. But we look at what we were paying for rent for an apartment in Halifax with parking, with storage, and we look at that and we're like, well, that's less than the mortgage we're paying now. Now, mind you, there's other costs with owning a home, of course, but that's what drove us to say, okay, well, we're done paying rent. We're going to try and pay the mortgage. Now, we were fortunate enough to get in a situation where we could do that. I'll say we got lucky with the house we found and that the timing of the market was really good. But I know a lot of friends and family who are like trying to figure out, you know, are we going to stay in this apartment? I know the landlords want to jack the rent up. Not saying that's a bad thing. And you know, if a landlord is entitled to increase their rent and they've been at a low rent for a long time, it is what it is. But, you know, I've seen a lot of people that are struggling, that want to buy a home, that they see the cost of what the groceries are going to cost, what the electricity is going to cost, what it's going to cost to put water in the home, like all these different things. And it's just shooting right up. And sorry, I kind of went off a little bit there, but just I've experienced it a lot in the last year with our shift to buying a home and stuff and seen it firsthand. I wouldn't have made it through if Jenna wasn't a CPA and an accountant that could figure it out for
that's
me.
A skill.
My goodness, I couldn't do it. So I'm looking forward to some facts you're going to spit out at me here.
I got a couple. I appreciate the input here, and first of all, I want to discuss that. So what I'm going to go through here is from a report titled "Living Wages in Nova Scotia 2023 Update" by the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. First of all, they want to, and I agree, state the benefits of paying a living wage. So that would be where minimum wage matches a living wage. So there's benefits for employees, they claim, employers, and the community, including reduced poverty, higher employee loyalty, and increased local investment, which I totally agree with. Now, just to get some data points, okay? So everyone said years ago, the valley's so cheap compared to the city, blah, blah, blah. Halifax living wage, $26.50 an hour. It's only actually... it is $25.40 in the valley, so barely any cheaper to live in Kentville, Wolfville, Nowheresville than it is to live in the city.
I didn't know that stat.
Cape Breton, $22.85 an hour, so, you know, marginally cheaper. The report has gone into a lot of detail, you know, fairly neutrally in its opinion. To sum up the increases, they're saying the living wage rates have seen an average increase of 14% this year, the most significant increase since calculations began on Halifax in 2015. This is attributed to rising costs of living, especially for shelter and food. Okay, the first thing I think we should hit on off the back of this, one of their suggestions is to do with taxation in Nova Scotia. The report suggests that tax and transfer systems need to be more sensitive to small increases in taxable income and avoiding disproportionate tax increases or benefit reductions. So, this is the first point I want Alex's opinion on. This is not the report anymore. This is kind of my research on this. But this has been a topic, particularly in our house, we've talked about for a while. Nova Scotia does not index tax rates. It is the only province along with PEI in the whole country that does not index tax rates. So to give some context there, if you index a tax rate, you adjust it to avoid what the experts and the economists call bracket creep. So that's when inflation drives income into higher tax brackets, which results in higher income taxation, but no increase in purchasing power. So we are apart from PEI, the only province not indexing those tax rates. Crazy. That is squeezing anybody. Anybody who gets a cost of living raise is actually ending up with less buying power as a result.
Wow. It's unfortunate that you say us and PEI? Us and PEI.
Yeah.
I guess it depends on what line of work you're in, right? Sometimes with a commission sales, you're not sure what tax bracket you may end up in at the end of the year. But I've seen it where, and it's unfortunate, where we're seeing those who might make a salary at 60 grand or whatever, say 55, 60, versus somebody making 80, 85. But because of the difference in tax brackets, they're not actually, like, the difference in what they're taking home
marginal.
It's not very much. So Jen and I were talking about the other day, it's like, you know, what do you need to make to live? And it's like 5 years ago, you know, if you're coming out of university and if you're making, you know, 50, 60, you're like, that's good. That was the six. That would go
solid.
That went up like right out of university.
Yeah.
5 years ago, 60 grand went a long way.
Well, lawyers, associates, not just like articling clerks, first-year associates in law firms years ago when I came to Canada were making 50K, and that was considered very, very, very competitive in Halifax at the time.
Wow, that
was like 2010.
Yeah, well, exactly. So even previous to that, so 50 even go longer. 60 went a long way 5 years ago, and now what do we say? Jen and I are like, well, 90 sounds like the new 60 right now. Now it's like 90 is kind of the bear to still keep living and stuff, and to be able to save and to be able to look towards the future and stuff. So I don't like that we're us along with PEI. Nothing that we're with PEI, but that we're one of the only two. That,
well, I just think when somebody needs a cost of living increase, that shouldn't push them into the next tax bracket.
No, it's
if they
necessity.
Need that to live. And everybody has an opinion on this. Jay Goldberg, he's the interim director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. He went pretty far. He called out Timmy directly, and he said, NS Premier Tim Houston is the only First Minister in Canada deliberately profiting off of inflation. Every other government in Canada has acknowledged that it's wrong to punish taxpayers simply for receiving a cost of living raise. Now, you and I are seeing fee compression in our industry right now.
Absolutely.
So our cost of living has risen dramatically, but in the world of commercial real estate, if we're paid on a per square foot commission basis, we haven't put our fees up.
No.
We get. I'm not saying that we are on the breadline, but we're we do what we do because we feel the compensation is competitive for the work we put in.
Yep.
I'll say that much.
Yeah.
But we are seeing fee compression too.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's no talk of it going any higher. It's like this is I mean, there are some out there who do see a higher value and are willing to increase a fee. But for the most part, we're at a standard, and at the point where sometimes we're fighting to keep it at that standard, right?
Well, we'll lower a fee to get a client's deal over the finish line when that's what's required. I do it all the time, and you do too.
Well, you get very close, and it's like, oh, you're almost done. But normally it says, say it's $4 a square foot, and then it's like, no, yours is actually gonna be $350, and it's like, well, that's not. Obviously, this is going to be the hill we die on for the deal. We've gotten this far.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. But then the problem is, and not to go off on a tangent in real estate, but like the problem will be is...
You got 30 minutes. Go for it.
So, okay. I need more than that. The problem is the more that happens, the more stress on the fees and the more instances like that where it's going down, then one day that could become market, right? That becomes more common than landlords or tenants will be like, oh, well, so-and-so took this fee. Why won't you?
And before you know it, an Egg McMuffin's $89 at McDonald's there.
I had a hot chocolate on my way here. It was $6. $6.
Somebody on Reddit the other day, candy canes now, tiny candy canes
that.
in Sobeys for $3.99 or $3.49. Anyway,
crazy.
You and I agree, index tax brackets. Is that James and Alec collective suggestion to Tim Houston number one? Okay,
yes.
Right. So let's go back to this report now and go to housing. Housing and affordability crisis. The report highlights the growing affordability crisis in housing, with rent and utility costs consuming a significant portion of budgets. It emphasized the need for government action in housing policy. Now, that came at the right time because the Nova Scotia government did release, I, for one, didn't believe it existed, but they did release their long-awaited 5-year housing plan, strategy plan, back at the end of October, including $1 billion in provincial spending, with a view to building at least 41,000 housing units. Last year, the province spent just $266 million, so quite an increase. It is needed. A recent assessment suggests there's a requirement for 80,400 units in the next 10 years. And unfortunately, many Nova Scotians are forgoing essentials like food to afford housing, and the majority cannot afford medium-priced homes. Now, my opinion is that removing HST from new apartment construction, this announcement came like 6 weeks ago, that's a good start. Lots are opposed, including politicians, expressing skepticism for the Nova Scotia 5-year housing strategy, citing a lack of detail and actionable steps. Now, the reason this is an important point for you to chime in on is, as an old fuddy-duddy here, I have not either bought, rented, or had friends that have bought or rented homes in quite a few years. Everyone's sort of settled. You and your social circle are in that pivotal time of life where everyone is picking the chess piece up and moving it down and hopefully leaving it down for a little while. Like, what are you seeing out there with places you've rented, friends, family? That must be a big topic of conversation, the lack of ability to get
Always.
into an owned home.
Always.
Or stay put and see rent skyrocket.
And the full year leading up to us buying our home, that was all the conversation. When our friends were over, with our family, that was all the conversation because we were trying.
We'd like you to come to a party on Sunday night at 7 o'clock to shit all over housing.
Oh, yeah. And to, shit on our strategy to finding a home and, you're never going to get one. We stopped.
That was a slap in the face. Did you invite all those people to your move-in party, like housewarming party?
Oh, no, they didn't get the invite to that one.
I would have had them over.
Out of spite, they come over.
Please
Welcome.
step into the house you said I would never get.
Wow, look at this. Look at all this nice furniture. It was crazy because, it was funny, the apartments, and I don't mind sharing the apartment numbers. So
tell me everything about your house, how much it cost, how much you both earn. I want to know everything. No one's going to know. No one listens to the podcast anyway.
No one listens to us. I could spell it all out. The apartments is public knowledge because you could search up these apartments. Anyway, I'm not going to name the apartments, but I'll say our first apartment, this is how much it changed. Our first apartment we shared with one other girl, and there was 3 of us, and it was $1,700 for a 2-bedroom. Good size, $1,700.
And what year was this, sorry?
2020.
Okay, just context. Cool.
2020. Right out of university. So we moved in September 2019, and we lived there for a year. And then we paid whatever it was, however much each that $1,750 was divided by.
We need your fiance here. It's too late in the day to figure that out.
I can't do that. Whatever that was. So that's great. But that was all in
$10.
Yeah, and then we split the power bill 3 ways. Great. So then Jen and I moved to our own apartment together, and we were it was like 800 and something square feet. And it was $1,645 plus parking, but still that was like, okay, it's for what we were getting, because the other one was, mind you, that other one was a 2-bedroom, big size, tall ceilings, like everything inclusive. So even though it was more rent, you get more out of it. Then we left that one, and the next one we went to was $2,295 for 1,000 square feet, 1 bedroom plus den, and that was not including parking, which is $150 a month. That was not including storage, which is $75 a month, not including power, and of course Wi-Fi, not including Wi-Fi. And then it went up. We stayed there 2 years, went up both times. And the landlord was like, at the point where we talked about, we might go buy a house, might get out of here. They were like, oh yeah, like they're eager because they wanted us out because they wanted to bring the rent up.
You have no leverage, dude.
No. So what happened was they were only able to put it up the 2%. So it went up $45 or something like that. And then when we try to find someone to take over our lease, they're like, no, we're not doing a lease takeover. You can find someone for us and they can do a brand new lease, but you need to let them know that we're going to increase the rent by $300.
I would have called on your subletting right just to spite them, even if it was for like 3 months.
I know. So it's going to be 1 month. And something about the notice, they weren't happy with the notice. I'm not going to name them, but they weren't happy with the notice period. They said, oh, you didn't give us enough notice that you're going to leave your lease. I said, no, I told you, 3 months. I actually told them 3 months in advance that we were going to leave. And they said, no. So anyways, new lease got taken out. New lease was started, it went up $300. We found the people that took it over, one was a physician at the hospital. So they were like, yeah, no problem, whatever. But still like $300. So now that unit that we paid, we started out paying $2,295 in 2021, it would have been, is now $2,800, $2,700, almost, including parking and stuff. And
now you have a mortgage, so you're building equity and
And then then going to the house part of things, it's crazy looking at the breakdown of our mortgage payment. Like what are we paying principal and what are we paying interest? And it's crazy. All things considered, we got a decent rate. We had an awesome mortgage specialist from RBC, really helped us through the process, got us a really good rate. But trying to find a house, and then our time in the market was kind of crazy with the bidding wars weren't still what they were, but we were seeing more prices. Houses were getting listed true to price, so it was still really high. High prices, whatever. We got lucky with ours. As you know, as us being licensed agents, I was able to do the deal myself. It worked.
My first ever apartment, this was 2006. This is when I left Wales and I moved to Florida. And I had a 1-bedroom apartment, shared it with someone, 1-bedroom apartment, all utilities in, including AC in Florida, which just pumps 24/7, 365. Beautiful, manicured landscape facility. It wasn't a prison. Complex that we lived in. Free parking. Guess what the rent was a month? beautifully kept, furnished, managed apartment with security, free parking. Everything was manicured. Oh, I should tell you, free use of a gym, free use of a pool, 24/7 on site, front desk.
$1,000.
$360.
About to leave the studio there.
$360 a month I paid. That's how much things have changed.
It's nuts.
So the report here just goes on. Just to backtrack on housing, I believe that, the real test is going to be the tangible impact that the 5-year strategy document and plan for the municipality or the provincial government, the tangible steps they can actually take. We will see. They better come up with a backup plan pretty damn quick if it doesn't work. This report then wrapped up. It talked about other things, food and soft costs. So obviously food and cost inflation is significantly impacting food budgets, childcare, transportation, that kind of thing. And they actually finished with some recommendations for employers and the government. They suggested that employers should prioritize paying a living wage and providing benefits and decent working conditions. I cannot believe and fathom the fact they actually had to suggest that people would do the basic right thing. And they also, of course, had a suggestion for the government that they should focus on increasing the minimum wage, enforcing labor standards, expanding public services, and investing in affordable housing. Again, shocked they would even have to mention those basic things. But that was the report from the Canadian Centre of Policy Alternatives about living wage in Nova Scotia. So that was a long insane as the crane, but I think we had to tackle the cost of living eventually.
I actually, on the way here, this morning on the way in, I was driving Jenna in and I said, what do you think of this topic? And she's like, absolutely. She's like, that's a topic people are going to want to hear. She was actually, she went so far as to say, this is such a hot topic amongst people that there's potential for a full episode to be dedicated to that. And having a financial analyst on or somebody on that can talk about from their standpoint, right? The expert advice and what's the future looking like kind of thing.
We've covered the two big things in this episode that warrant 25 hours each of discussion, one being cost of living and the other being drivers of Nova Scotia. This is Reddit Roundup. Haligonians losing their minds over minor inconveniences.
All right, the Reddit Roundup in the R Halifax. So I got to use my phone, look at the camera, looking at the camera. R Halifax from Nomad_West says, as a paramedic here in the central region, please, and space, drive, space, extremely, space, carefully. I don't know what's in the water the past few weeks, but the number of collisions is through the roof. As an already borderline burnt out medic, for the love of Anne Murray, please don't make me go to more brutal MVCs. Motor vehicle collisions, I'm assuming. Yeah, I tend to agree. I think the worst of the worst come out as we get closer to Christmas time. That's when the real bad drivers come out to play.
Well, this was one comment, which I think is totally true. And it was somebody who said the problem with the cost of living squeeze right now is that folks will not be getting their winter tires put on or replace their tires because, of course, it's an expensive endeavor. So we actually stand to have an even more dangerous time on the road this winter.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually seeing a comment, I think might be a reply to that, but it's similar, about not getting the winter tires on. Blown Wide Open says, can confirm, foregoing winter tires this year myself. Can't rationalize buying them with the insane cost of all the other necessities. Just going to park the car at the first sight of snow. Frig this economy. I am so ready to riot.
That's a good idea. So I did that last year and I got good tires on the car, but every year I get a little bit older, I value my life more, and I do recognize I'm 1 year closer to the grave. So last year, my little rule was I wasn't going to go on the highway when it was clearly dangerous to drive on the highway. So I spent a lot of time last year leaving additional time prior to meetings, places I needed to be, to use slower roads. And my rationale was that I would be safer. Now, whether it plays out or not, I don't know. I've got a couple of bullet points of ranting I'll get to in a minute, but let's pull some of these comments out. The first one was Hand77 Shot First. Very, very salient point. Said, people have been getting progressively worse since the pandemic. But since the pandemic, Alec, have you seen it get worse? I have. And I'm not the person that goes, well, it's all the Ontarians who moved in. That's not the case. I just think people have become crappy drivers.
I think so. I think everyone's kind of become, I shouldn't say like aggressive. Everyone's not an aggressive driver, but just impatient. Everyone's just impatient in their driving now, waiting at lights. I mean, I every day I see people really going through reds because they just can't wait the extra few minutes. And I get part of it. I get the frustration of waiting in traffic and stuff. But I feel like we're seeing it a lot more than normal. people are frustrated if somebody's going slow in front of them. They're mad at them when really it's 5 cars in front of them that's going slow.
Oh yeah.
But
leave earlier as well. Just manage your time better.
I know everyone's all mad. I mean, I am a culprit of that, of being all annoyed about traffic and being like, rah, rah.
What do they say? You're not stuck in traffic. You are traffic.
I am traffic. I come home at the end of the day. I'm like, oh, I was in traffic for an hour going to the city, and Jenna will just say, okay, wake up earlier, leave earlier. And I'm like, no, I guess that's a good point. I guess whatever. But everyone's just a bit more frustrated and in a rush, and everything's added together, right? And with the cost of living and all that going on, I'm frustrated because I'm stuck in traffic, going to the groceries to spend twice as much as I want to spend at the grocery store for half the amount of food that I want, only to drive home in traffic again. My food goes bad by the time I get home because of the traffic. I'm going off right now, but...
Then you got to settle your taxes up. They're too high, and they haven't indexed those damn tax brackets.
Oh, Mother Hubbard. So I sound like one of those frustrated drivers right now, and I am a bit impatient with driving, but I have to get better at it. I have to get better. I'm not I'm still a smart driver. I'm still obey the law. I avoid... getting into any jackpots and whatnot, but I am one of those people that gets annoyed and frustrated in the car, especially if I miss a light. Like the other day, I hit
those damn reds.
I hit every red on Portland Street on the way to my house, and I was like, at one point I punched the wheel. I shouldn't be saying that.
So you have an anger issue to put on top of the battery as well. And it actually leads to a really good comment here. I'm going to assume they're talking about golf with the username I can't find the hole. I don't understand. They're talking about golf or putting a key in a door, clearly. I don't understand how someone I agree with this, can get into a motorized 3,000-pound vehicle and drive around like a maniac and risk serious injury or death just to save a moment or two of time. Alec Cranston. It only takes a split second to change someone's life for the worst. It's true.
Yeah.
That's the bottom line, right? And we all know, and we all know people who've had accidents or know people who've lost loved ones in car accidents. And often they weren't the idiot driver. It was the person who crossed the median.
Yeah.
My opinion on this is, and I'm going to get on my British high horse here, I have driven in many countries around the world over the last 20 years, many, many countries around the world. I have never encountered driving, not just in Canada. I've driven all across Canada too. I have never encountered driving like Halifax. And I blame it on a few things. I blame it on the fact that in North America, people drive automatic vehicles. I grew up in a country where everyone drives a standard. When you've got a stick, you don't have anything free to hold your phone with. You don't have anything free to fiddle with the radio.
You gotta hold your stick.
You gotta hold your stick. You gotta keep that firm grip on the stick the entire time.
Wrapped right around it. Yeah.
Wrapped right around tightly, so you can, with a death grip, so you can yank it whenever you need to. But in seriousness, there is so many opportunities in automatic vehicles without a clutch, without a gear shifter, to be distracted. And the one thing I noticed when I go back to the UK and hire a standard vehicle is I have to have all hands on deck. I sometimes find it hard to talk and drive. Like there is no opportunity there to get distracted. And the other thing I'll say, getting even higher on my British high horse, which was quite high to begin with.
You're getting high, man.
I was in the UK last summer. I drove 3,000 kilometers, did a big loop of the country. I did not use my horn once. I can't get 2 kilometers down the road here without honking someone who does something dumb or goes on a red light or doesn't go on a green light, or you know how it goes. I drove for 2 weeks and we crisscrossed the country literally twice. Never once did anybody do anything to me that caused me to need to sound my horn.
I don't use my horn often now that I think about it. I find the most common time is when someone's actually distracted in front of you at the light. They're on their phone.
Oh, the old green light, but they don't move, and then the light cycles through, and then they're nervous. And
do you ever see those videos people do where like the light turns green and it instantly you hit the horn on the guy just to mess with them?
Well, this is a thing, and I won't try to sound like I'm aware of their culture too much, but I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, halifaxpodcast@gmail.com, please, for hate mail. I think it's Japan. It's culturally correct and acceptable that they're 50 cars deep and 5 lanes deep in an inner city. When the light goes green, everybody lays on their horn together.
I couldn't last
And
there.
they say you're in the cities and you just hear it, and it's not an aggression thing, it's just everybody sounds their horn. You can also do it at Bayers Lake on a Saturday afternoon, I'm sure, but that's because everyone's driving badly.
That's a whole can of worms there. My question to you was gonna be, where's your least favorite area in Nova Scotia to drive amongst? I'm not like the highway or stuff, but like one area. And mine would be Bayers Lake. Like once you're in there, you're stuck. Like on a Saturday afternoon.
Mine is Bayers Lake. Normally, at the moment, it's in and around Duke Street, coming off the 102, where they're doing some work on the bridge. And the city hasn't done, or Cogswell, these things, the city hasn't done the best at directing and channeling traffic. So that in conjunction with poor impatient drivers means everyone's at fault and you can't do anything right. But I tell you what I found, and maybe I'll buy you one for Christmas, but dash cams. So I fitted my wife and I, both of our cars with front and rear HD dash cams. I probably take video off them weekly, and I'm convinced at some point that they're going to do two things. The dash cam is either going to document my fiery wreck death, or the serious thing is I'm going to have to use that footage to get myself out of trouble in an insurance claim where it's my wood against theirs.
Okay.
I was rear-ended on the highway, unfortunately, 4 years ago. Hit me at about 65 kilometers an hour, and I was stationary, and it was not nice. And that's when I went out and bought dash cams, because I was convinced the person behind me was texting and I had no proof. And at the rear-facing dash cam at that point, we're visual here now with these wonderful cameras, thank you Podstarter, that I would have at least seen her driving with her phone. It was our word against theirs, and the police didn't charge anyone. But go and get dash cams, people. You don't get your car broken into because people don't know if it's on a battery or not, and they're being filmed.
Ah, interesting.
I've learned that recently. People don't like being filmed, apparently.
No.
Apparently not. And all I'll finish off by saying here is I have thought that we had a wonderful discussion that we could and should have with Halifax Regional Police about traffic enforcement, because I see very little of it these days compared to days gone by. For the record, I have reached out to the media office at Halifax Regional Police with a request for Don McLean, long time ago, not that Don McLean, the current acting police chief for Halifax Regional Police, to come on for an interview. I have not heard back, and I would love to have him on.
From the meteor office, the meteor showers coming in.
The Aurora Borealis. I know that's the Northern Lights. The media. Is that my accent?
Yeah,
Meteor
it's your
office?
accent. You said media. It sounded like you said meteor office, and I thought, do we have an office for meteors?
Media's office. We will do soon when the world ends.
But,
all right, so that's. I mean, if we have hours left, I'll just talk about driving. You can go home and pick me up tomorrow.
I'm just gonna sit here and talk about driving. I appreciate you finishing us off on the Reddit roundup there. That was good.
And to wrap, this is Reddit Roundup. I've ranted. It's not ranting Roundup. It's Reddit Roundup. We should get back to Reddit.
Wrap it up now.
Fearlessware9385 said somebody didn't have their load secured and their green living room chair almost landed on our windshield yesterday as we were crossing into Nova Scotia from New Brunswick, and it was terrifying. Could be a New Brunswicker with a very big tractor trailer following us at 110 kilometers an hour. So no joke.
Man,
I mean,
you gotta secure your load.
You gotta secure your load.
You can't let your load just fly everywhere.
You can't. You got. I mean,
green chair too.
Green chair. Those big loads. You gotta watch. Gotta watch out. Is all I say.
You gotta be careful for those. And if you're in the vicinity of a big load that's gonna fly off a car, then you gotta watch out.
So thank you to everybody on Reddit for being Redditors. We do have a guest.
Yes, we do.
Mr. Matthew Gorman has walked in, so we will go out and greet him. And with the magic of audio editing, it will just seem like a second,
as if he was just appeared in here.
So we got him, we dragged him in, we're joined very gratefully. We're very pleased to have Matt Gorman on the show with us. Matt is counsel at Cox & Palmer's Halifax office, where he brings a sharp focus to his practice in entertainment law, intellectual property, and corporate and commercial transactions, where his expertise shines in the music industry and talent advocacy. Matt's client roster is as diverse as it is impressive, encompassing award-winning performers, songwriters, producers, as well as managers, social media influencers, and indie music publishers and record labels. Now, he is not just confined to the legal arena. Matt is a respected voice in the music community. He's a frequent writer, lecturer, and speaker on music-related issues, sharing his insights at conferences and events across the country. He's also a proud member of the International Association of Entertainment Lawyers. Matt is also the force, and that's the primary reason we've dragged him in here today, behind Oceantown Music, offering business advisory and management services to clients in the music and entertainment sectors. His background as a musician playing drums, piano, and guitar not only fuels his passion, but also informs his legal practice, which gives him a very unique perspective on the industry. And we're thrilled to have you with us today, Matt.
Thank you. What an intro.
Did you like that
one, eh?
I like that. Where'd you get that from?
I got that from, I was up to about 4 o'clock this morning writing that. I started my research maybe a month ago. Yeah, that was a long journey.
I like the sharp focus. I haven't heard it quite framed that way, but I like it.
Well, there's no copyright. You can put this on LinkedIn, do whatever you want.
Absolutely.
Right? Just rip it.
Yeah, it's yours now.
It's just the episode description. That's what it'll be.
Do we even need to interview you, or should we just leave on a high note? Well, great to have you. Thank you so much.
I think we leave on a high note.
Thank
That's
you
great.
so much for joining us.
It's all downhill from here.
Well, thanks for coming on. We really appreciate it. So,
Great to be here.
James alluded to kind of what you're up to now. So I guess for starters, I know there's a lot of different paths you can take in the legal arena and where you might go. What sort of led you to going down to the entertainment industry, and how'd you kind of get your start there?
Yeah, I mean, how long's the podcast? Do we have?
Oh, we're about 6 hours an episode. You're
Okay,
good.
there we go.
There'll be more water coming. Don't worry.
Yeah, I'll give you the short and sweet kind of version of it. I mean, so look, I grew up as a musician. I grew up playing piano, classical piano, gravitated towards the drums, played in rock bands, heavy metal bands, funk bands, all that stuff growing up, played guitar as well. And I was always interested in the law as well. And I kind of always assumed that at some point, if I got into law, I would also get into entertainment law. So went to law school, became a lawyer. But I guess I didn't really think that there was a market for entertainment services on the East Coast. And I kind of felt like, listen, if I'm not in Toronto or LA or New York, I can't do entertainment law. Is kind of what I thought at first. And so I went to Cox and Palmer. I joined their corporate commercial group. I did a lot of corporate transactional work. I then went and worked in-house as regulatory counsel for a local company. And at that point in time, I realized, listen, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. I'm not going to be 45 or 50 starting my own entertainment practice. So I started what was Ocean Town Music at the time, which was essentially my own law firm. And I went around, I did conference speaking. I linked up with a lot of my musician friends, told them what I was doing. And I just hustled and hustled and hustled until I got a pretty decent client roster that grew and grew and grew. And I realized, well, hey, I'm doing this corporate gig, and now I've got this other law firm sort of on the side. This is growing. There's only 24 hours in a day. I have to figure out what I'm going to do here. And so I went out on my own and did Ocean Town Music for a little bit as a law firm. And then I eventually joined up with Cox and Palmer. I rejoined Cox and Palmer and now exclusively do entertainment law with them. So it's, I guess, a bit of the short version, but it was a grind and it's a lot of hustle. But it really was naturally the fusion between my love of music and my love for entertainment and love and interest of entertainment law. And I realized that even though I'm based in Halifax, I can have not just a Nova Scotia-based practice or a national practice, but really an international practice. And really my clients are all over the world at this point, and really proud of what I've grown and really love what I do.
Right. Wow. So would
Does that
you
make
do
sense?
the law? It does. And here's the first question. Would you do the law without the entertainment and the music passion fueling it? Because Alec and I, we really enjoy what we do for a living in the commercial real estate space. I will be honest and say I don't have a passion that is a true life passion I fuse with that. I actually work in order to then pursue my passions when I take the suit off. You seem to be in a slightly different environment where every day the passion that you had as a kid and from childhood is also fueling your professional life, and it's running deeply through it. Do you ever separate the law from the entertainment, or could you do the law by itself, or do they have to be married in the way you see things?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, I didn't do entertainment law at first, right? So when I joined Cox and Palmer, I originally did corporate commercial transactional work. I did a little bit of criminal law on the side. I even, had a little traffic ticket legal practice where I was defending folks that were given traffic tickets in violation, which was a lot of fun going to Supreme
We have
Court.
all been there. We need you. Go back and do
I could
that.
be there today.
Exactly. I mean, it was my way of getting to court. It may have been night court at 7 or 8 p.m. and may not have been glamorous, but I actually loved all that stuff. So to answer your question, yeah, I would have been doing law for sure, and I liked what I was doing, and I loved the idea of having a very broad practice. I didn't really like the idea of narrowing in on anything, strangely enough. So the answer is yes, I would definitely have been a lawyer, definitely would have practiced law. But as time went, the practice of law is interesting for me in that way, because I enjoyed that broad-based practice. But then I realized over time, I mean, listen, this is really what I want to do. Entertainment's really what I want to do. And how do I sort of gravitate towards that and grow that business? And so I was lucky to find an area within the law that I could pursue and that I could sort of grow over time. And I still do a little bit of corporate commercial law on the side and some transactional stuff on the side, which I still like doing occasionally. But I've been lucky enough where the entertainment stuff takes up the bulk of my time as a lawyer. I mean, about 80% plus of what I do is almost exclusively like music at this point. And so I'm really lucky to be able to do that.
Oh, good for you.
So are clients, like new clients, are they coming and are they finding you? Are you still doing that hustle of going? Because you said not just Nova Scotia, but you can go national, international for your clients and find them, or do you go find them, or are a lot of them coming to you?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, I do a lot of conference speaking. So I was in Kelowna for Breakout West not that long ago. Did an hour and a half panel out there. I got some clients from that conference. Other times I'll love an artist, I'll love their music, and I'll reach out to either the artist or the management team, and I'll say, hey, would love to have a conversation. And sometimes that actually leads to a great relationship.
Yeah.
And other times it's managers. Managers, might have a roster of 4, 5, 10 clients, and all of those clients might need legal representation. And I may have met a manager at a conference a year ago, or I may have acted for that manager, on some other transaction or file where they just remember my name. So referrals and drumming up business comes in a whole bunch of different sort of ways. But I find the more I put myself out there, the more conference speaking I do, the more writing I do, but first and foremost, the better work I do ultimately is driving the clients. But it is a lot of hustle though.
Yeah.
I'm constantly looking for talent. I'm constantly reaching out to managers and artists and labels. I was in Toronto last week and met with the major labels in Toronto just to kind of shake hands and get to know people. And the more I do that, the more the clients come. But it's time consuming. Like anybody that's interested in developing their own business, you got to put a lot of time into it.
We've been there in the commercial real estate world. It's 3 years before you'll call it profitable.
Sure.
It's 3 years before you're making an income. Alec was
Sustainable.
Alec was ahead of the curve. He would have been when did you join us? 2.5 years ago?
2021.
2021. Alec's ahead of the curve on most, but there is that valley in the beginning, and it turns a lot of people off. But the rewards come for those who grind and hustle.
100%.
And if we turn not away from law, but if we look at the broader thing of talent in Nova Scotia, and I appreciate not everybody you work with is living here in the province, but for people like me who aren't embedded in that world, just sum up the talent we have. And we look at it from a business side of things. I always tell people, a lot of my work's in Burnside. There are things happening in Burnside that are changing the world. That when you drive past a dirty-looking warehouse, you don't know what's going on in there. And I'm assuming that we are all underinformed at the potential and impact of entertainment in our wonderful province.
Yeah, I would say it's probably true. Although I feel like the East Coast has always had a decent reputation for good music here. And I think that's probably been true for years and years, and now is no exception. From my perspective today, I kind of look at the talent pool in Nova Scotia and the East Coast as being quite broad. We not only have a lot of great singer-songwriters like we've probably always had for a long period of time, or East Coast style kind of music, we also have a lot of great rappers and hip-hop artists. We also have a lot of great producers. We have a lot of really, really world-class like session musicians and backup vocalists. And the more I do the work that I do and the more shows I go to in Nova Scotia, the more conferences I go to, the more I realize that from my perspective, it just is a really broad set of talent that we have in Nova Scotia that people may not necessarily identify right away. I mean, obviously we hear about the big names on the radio and all that stuff, but we really have great producers and songwriters and folks that you may not have heard of, but are always at those like great shows, playing drums or whatever. So I'm constantly impressed and blown away by the talent here. And I think it's always been great. And I think now is no exception.
Yeah. And I think the exciting thing too is with social media, I mean, I'm thinking of musicians as well as influencers. I mean, you could really, from no matter where you are in the world, you could blow up at any time. Like, keeping tabs, like, is that something you do regularly, is keeping tabs on, an emerging musician or influencer on TikTok or on Instagram and saying, whoa, they're picking up speed, they're from around here, I should reach out, kind of thing?
Yeah, no, it's something that I do, and I watch out for it. That's what record labels do. That's what record companies do. And there are these folks at record labels called A&Rs, artist and repertoire. And
say you're the legal version of the A&R. You stood in the back thinking, I'm going to represent them one day.
Well, it's interesting though, because some entertainment lawyers have no interest in doing that. And some of the best entertainment lawyers in the world, the most well-known ones, and some of the most well-known ones in the US, for example, will admit that they have no idea what will take off and what will be great, or even today, what is good, like what makes an artist great. Some lawyers will admittedly say, I have no idea. They're just really great lawyers. They're great at what they do, and that's it. There are other entertainment lawyers that I chat with that are really interested in the music, and they feel as though they can spot talent. I'm not saying that I'm particularly good at it, but I love that side of the business. I do love, going through TikTok every now and again, or Instagram or whatever, or identifying a new artist whose single just dropped and saying, wow, that's really, really great. I mean, who's their label? And maybe they're independent. And yeah, I'll reach out absolutely and say, hey, what's up? Just wanted to say, love your single. If you ever want to chat, let me know. And I do love that side of the business. And ultimately, I got into management in Ocean Town Music. It's exactly what that, although Ocean Town Music started out as a law firm, all my legal work now flows through Cox and Palmer. But Ocean Town Music as a brand really now is a management company. And I manage a producer through that company. So I feel as though, that's kind of a fusion of my love for, A&R and management and all that stuff and love of the law. But yeah, I love scouting for talent and just checking out what's good. And sometimes I'm right. Most of the time I'm wrong. Like
But when
everybody.
you find the one that you were right on, that must be
Absolutely.
very rewarding.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But what's funny is you just never know what's going to take off. I mean, and you can have world-class songwriters and, world-class executives that might listen to something and say, hey, that's a hit or that's going to be great. And it might just fall flat on its face. And other things on TikTok or Instagram might blow up and you just aren't anticipating or expecting it. And so it really makes music really bizarre and weird in that way. But I think what everyone loves, though, is everyone loves a great melody. Everyone loves a great song. And I think that always moves and impacts anybody. So that's what I always look out for. Is that person a great songwriter?
Yeah.
They may or may not be a great performer. They may or may not be able to play their instrument very well. But are they a great songwriter? And I'm always interested and fascinated by that, and I always look out for songwriters.
Yeah.
I don't think engaging with them early as well is important. And if we look at the scope of, let's go back to the legal side of things, because I think this is an interesting fusion, which is why we're focusing on it. I think a little bit more than we planned before we started the discussion with you. This is the way things are going, and it's great. What is the typical scope of work with a client? When we think these artists and legal representation, we think, reviews and negotiations of the obvious recording contracts, management contracts. You think plagiarism lawsuits, or some of that stuff that we see in the news, looking at Ed Sheeran and all these high-profile people, or you look at Taylor Swift and having, I'm not too up with the finer details, but having, entire back catalogs essentially stolen or whatever, and having to re-record things. People think that the commercial real estate world is really glamorous, and as we always say, it's often just very boring, but it's still rewarding. Well, what is the typical scope of work with a client? And we're not asking you to name them. We respect the confidentiality agreements, but take us through what you do. Isn't that the one question we never ask people enough? What do you do?
Yeah, no, for sure. It's a good question. It's really a bunch of different things. It just depends on the client and it depends on where they are in their career. So for example, if I'm acting for a recording artist that's signed to a record company that maybe just released an album, a lot of the work that I do there is kind of referred to as album clearances. So there will be producers who may have produced the entire album, or several producers that may have produced different tracks, or that performing artists may have used some samples. There may be session musicians involved in the album. And I'm papering all that. I'm getting producer agreements for all the producers. I'm getting songwriter split sheets for all the songwriters that may have touched a particular composition. Someone that came in the studio and laid down a bass track or whatever, I'm throwing a piece of paper at them to make sure that whoever touched and breathed on that project has signed a piece of paper to ensure that album is clear. And so that's sort of on the the performing artist side. A lot of my work is doing that. I also act for a lot of producers, so a lot of producers that produce for many artists. And anytime that producer produces for an artist, there's again a producer agreement, but I'm acting on the other side. So sometimes I'm acting for the artist, other times I'm acting for the producer. Other times it's just giving people options. They come to me with a problem and they say, "Look, I think my song was stolen." Or, hey, I don't understand royalties in the music industry. I don't know how I'm supposed to get paid. How am I supposed to collect stuff? I know my song's being performed on the radio, and I know, it was used in a TV show. How do I actually get paid for that? So sometimes I sit down with clients or have long calls and kind of walk through the whole business / royalties 101.
Yeah.
Have that kind of discussion, and that's my scope for that particular client. So it really, really varies. I don't do a lot of litigation. So to your point about the Ed Sheeran situation. I often try to resolve situations. I've got, a handful of files right now that are quite messy. People are fighting about songwriting. People are saying somebody stole my song, et cetera, et cetera. And I try to work at a resolution. But if it gets to the point where you can't work at a resolution and people just are butting heads and there's just no common ground, well, that's where I'll pass the file off to a litigator. Exactly. So I don't do that in the entertainment space, but more often than not, things settle. I think like a lot of legal disputes, because the cost of going to court is absolutely ridiculous, particularly in the entertainment space. So there really needs to be a monster load of money, if that makes sense. Monster load of money, we'll go with that, for it to even make sense to justify the legal cost to go to court. So more often than not, there's a deal to be struck. And so my role might be dispute resolution or kind of settlement negotiation. So that's another kind of aspect of what I do too.
Super varied.
All right.
It is super varied.
And so flipping to Oceantown Music,
Yeah.
what would be your scope of work there? You said you have a client now, so what kind of are you going out, and I'll let you explain it, kind of what your scope of work there for and the management side of things.
No, for sure. So as I said earlier, Oceantown Music really was my my law firm when I started doing entertainment law. Now legal work flows to Cox and Palmer, management work flows through Oceantown Music. And my legal practice is so busy. I mean, I only have one management client. It's a producer named Mike Saunier. He's from Toronto, currently based in Los Angeles, and just a monster producer, songwriter. He wrote and produced Noah Cyrus's July, which has, well over 1 billion streams globally. He, worked on the Black Panther record and did some vocal production work for Kendrick Lamar. And Weekend Track has produced and written with Maggie Rogers, Julia Michaels, et cetera. So really, really, really great songwriter and producer, and just a monster talent, multi-instrumentalist. So when I met Mike and we started working together, and he was in need of management services, it was almost kind of like a no-brainer. And I find it was something, that just developed over time. I would chat with Mike, and I eventually was providing him advice that had nothing to do with the law. And after several months, I was like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And so that's when we decided, listen, he didn't have a manager. He needed a manager. I was at a point in my career where I felt like I could offer that, which is so much more than legal services. It just really encompasses the whole scope of someone's career, even down to their calendar. I chatted with him earlier today about shifting the session in his calendar. So it's
you're that hands-on.
I am that hands-on.
Amazing.
Yeah, I'm that hands-on. And so that's really what I do with Oceantown Music right now, is I manage Mike Saunier. That may grow over time, but as of right now, my legal practice is busy, and it's constantly growing. So I don't have the time to take on more management. Even earlier today, actually, I had a discussion with a local producer that wanted a manager, and we kind of chatted about how that might work over time. So I'm very mindful of not stretching myself too thin.
Right.
I'm very, very busy with my legal practice, and I meet way too many managers that have way too many clients. And so I don't want to be a manager one of these days that has like 5 or 6 clients, and I just can't service them, and I'm only chatting with them once a month or something. If I'm managing a client, I want to be incredibly hands-on, because, you're getting a decent commission off of their income, off of their career. And so I'm a firm believer that you really need to add value and work for that.
Yeah.
So that's what I do with Oceantown Music right now.
Most managers, do they want, is it ideal to have only 2 or 3 clients? Like, you don't want to have ones that you've met, some managers you've met and ran into. Are there some that just have a ridiculous amount and they are stretched too thin, and maybe not having that value add that you're talking about, and ultimately the talent is going to pay on that one?
Yeah, no, it depends. I mean, I think there are a lot of managers right now that are stretched too thin.
Yeah.
I think there are a lot of managers that didn't intend to be stretched too thin, but then ultimately became stretched too thin as they started taking on more and more clients.
Yeah.
Every manager has to figure out their happy medium, I guess, between ensuring that they've got a decent roster, but ensuring they're not stretching themselves too thin. I also appreciate that, managers that are only doing management, career managers, are only typically getting paid when their clients are getting paid. And so if you've only got 1 or 2 clients, and, let's just say they're performing artists, and they're at a point in time in their career where they're not touring, they're past their last album cycle, and they're maybe taking 5 or 6 months off. Well, guess what? I mean, that manager may not be getting any revenue from that artist because it's a downtime for that particular
And they're
artist.
still managing them, I'm assuming, too, so they're still working.
Sure, they're still working,
Yeah.
even during those periods where there might not be income. So I'm mindful of that as well. That managers, if you are a career manager, it's a tough market. It's tough to make a living out of it. So you need to have enough. Sometimes you need to have enough clients so you can pay the rent, pay your bills. If you're a manager that's incredibly lucky and manages like Taylor Swift or Ed Sheeran, I would imagine you're probably okay not having too many other clients to deal
Taylor who's that? What's the name? So, like,
yeah.
if as we wrap this up, if you know you don't want to have too many folks, you got to be mindful of your schedule. We're like that. We spread ourselves too thin, or you're taking files that you're chewing glass on, and they're not the most productive for you. But who is the one person who, if they call you, you are finding the time, you are making the time, and you can either be a surprise local artist or a Taylor Swift or a Prince of the world. But who is that one person who you say, yeah, I don't even need to look. I'm taking you on, and I will move mountains.
Yeah, and it could be anybody as a
It
management
could be
client.
anybody.
You know, this name popped in my head right away, and it's just I think probably one of my all-time favorite musicians and just people in the industry, and that's Dave Grohl. If Dave Grohl called me,
Oh yeah, I would probably do the same. I couldn't even have the skill. I'd just be like,
for sure. If Dave Grohl asked me to play drums in his project, if he asked me to manage him, if he asked me to do all that stuff for free, I probably would. But that's just such an obvious answer though, because Dave Grohl is Dave Grohl. But locally, I don't know. I'd have to, I saw Dan Mangan play at Rebecca Cohen a few nights ago with my wife, and he's just a mind-blowing songwriter, performer, artist. And if Dan Mangan gave me a call and said, hey, I want to work with you, I need a manager, I would say, yes, absolutely, Dan, let's do it.
Yeah.
okay, Dan, if you're listening, so you now need to pick the phone up. Okay,
Call.
Just get onto Cox and Palmer's website there, and then where do you represent him though? You take him on as a legal client or with Ocean Town?
Whatever he
Whatever he needs.
whatever he wants.
What do you
Whatever
want,
he
man?
needs. Okay.
Do you see like going forward down the future? I know you're in your legal practice, but do you see it down the road where management kind of becomes more like right now? You said legal's about 80%, but then maybe it starts to flow more towards the management side down the road.
We'll see. I mean, I not anytime soon.
Yeah.
As of right now, I love the legal work I do. I love working at Cox and Palmer. They've been massively supportive of what I'm doing in entertainment, and my legal practice continues to grow. I'm very fortunate and lucky. So not anytime soon. My legal practice is I always want to make sure that I have time to act for those clients, but maybe down the road for sure.
Yeah.
Right now, I love the balance I have right now. I
Yeah.
love the work I do with Mike. It is a lot of work, time consuming endeavor for sure, but it doesn't take away from my legal practice. So, we'll come back in maybe a few years time and we can have that conversation
Yes.
then to see where I am.
It'll be a lot grayer. Well, Matt, this has been great, and the socials there. You gave yourself a plug. I'm assuming there is some music. Are you still publishing stuff that people can access, or tell people where you want them to go? I'll give you some freedom.
Sure.
You got another 6 hours.
So listen, I try to be fairly active on Instagram, and I post a lot of legal kind of content through Instagram. So you can follow me at Ocean Town Music. And folks can email me anytime at my email address with Cox and Palmer. That's mgorman@coxandpalmer.com. You can just Google Matthew Gorman, lawyer, Halifax, and my email will pop up if you didn't get that. So Instagram or email.
Awesome.
So this was really insightful. We're so pleased that we could have you on. I never knew that those worlds would collide in quite the unique way that they have, and by design as well by you, which I think is even more impressive.
Yeah, it's just cool to see know more of the behind the scenes. Like we see it, everybody in Halifax, Nova Scotia sees it for the surface and sees if someone's kind of starting to rise up as far as a musician goes or an influencer or whatever it may be. But then hear behind the scenes how it all kind of works and who's involved. And for me, I always just thought, oh, there was a manager or there was just a lawyer, but there's both, and there's the record label and there's all these different moving parts, and it's cool to know. But I'm a big entertainment buff. That's like kind of my passion. So I could talk about this for hours about everything involved with it. So for me, I really enjoyed this.
Well, we'll bring you
episode.
back as we have certain
Yeah, I
guests
think
we like
so.
to bring back on, and we'll put you on that list. I think there's as your practice develops and Ocean Town develops, there's probably is genuinely another conversation to be had.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, it was an honor to be here. Happy to chat about this stuff anytime. Obviously, a big passion of mine, and I love what you guys are doing. So keep up the good
thank
work,
you.
and thanks
Awesome.
again.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for joining us on Matter of Facts. We'll be back next month or at
Yes.
some point, and we'll just see where the world's going. I think we kind of stick a pin in this when we walk out the studio. We don't plan anything, and let's pick back up on Halifax in a month and see where it is.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And as always, thank you to those who tune in and subscribe to us and follow us and all that. If you have any questions, concerns, halifaxpodcast@gmail.com. You can find James and myself on LinkedIn. If you have any guest suggestions, or maybe you want to come on, you think you have something interesting to say, reach out. We'd be happy to have a discussion.
We are not a promotional platform.
We
though.
are not
I get a
promotional.
lot of people say, I want to come on and talk about my healthy chocolate or something. Nope, it's not what we're doing.
No, well,
No Arbonne discussions on this podcast.
Well, that's my new business, man. I just want to talk about it briefly. Like I got these chocolates I've been making at home. They call me Willy Bonka. But
Willy Bonka. Willy Wanker.
Willy Wonka. Yeah. So, in summary, thank you very much for tuning in to season 2, episode 4.
Thanks to Matt.
Thank you to Matt Gorman for coming on. Thank you to Terrible Drivers in Halifax for giving us a topic to discuss. And no thank you to the rising costs of absolutely everything.
See you next month. Stay classy.
Thank you once again for tuning in to the Matter of Facts podcast.
But you can get more of us. You can subscribe on any good podcast provider. You can follow us on Instagram at Matter of Facts Podcast. And for all that great feedback and abuse, you can send it by email to halifaxpodcast@gmail.com.
And of course, you can always find James Collins and I on the internet.
Please do get in touch, and we look forward to seeing you next time.